Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. We got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. It happened. Knew it was going to happen. Putin invaded Ukraine. And look, the president did what the president could do. He came out, he said Putin's the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. The president said today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be imported to Russia. This is it. This is the play. Will the international community be able to come together and hold them accountable? Understand, we're in a really interesting moment because Putin is betting that we're not going to have the resolve. He is betting that he's going to be able to get the old gang back together. He wants to restore Russia's place in the world by getting the former Soviet states back under his umbrella. That is the legacy. And anyone who says anything different, off their rocker, because look, anyone in that position would be wanting to do the same thing. If you're a former KGB officer, if you were there when it fell, wouldn't the historical legacy of your name be, I brought it all back together. I alone fixed it. Hey, wait a minute. We've heard that before. Where did we hear that? Oh, yeah, our authoritarian guy, Mr. Art of the Bad Deal. He really fixed us all right. Now, look, Putin's been in power since 99. He's looking down the end of this at some point going, hey, we got to get this back together, and it's gonna happen now. And he's looking at what the handiwork he's done here in the U.S., getting that guy elected, and the kind of divisions that he's able to take advantage of. Wow. And the thing is the weird thing is and I guess, he jumped into this, and there's a couple of interesting moments that I think are going to happen at some point, because I don't think the people of Russia are with him. The first bit of information that's coming out is, you've got this unprovoked war that he started, he alone, going into a neighboring country of people who might know each other, and there was no groundswell of support. There was no, hey, let's go do this. There was no national rise. There was none of that. And if this gets into being a little long, if it's a day-long war, it's going to be great for him. He will, his legacy will be, heading upwards. The people will be thrilled. Hey, we won with the national pride, all that kind of stuff. Kind of remember back in the 90s when we went into Iraq, or actually we didn't go into Iraq really. We didn't go into Baghdad. How we went in, we had a quick little war, we won, came home to the parades and kissing babies and doing all that stuff, remember? And the national pride and the chest thumping. If that happens, look out. I think we see more. But if this turns into a long, drawn-out thing where you start looking at casualties, where working-class families are looking and going, we sent our kids to be in the military for this, I think you're going to have an interesting moment. And I think, Putin had better look out, not walk by any open windows, because, yesterday he brought together all of the, the captains of industry, the oligarchs, the people who, when the wall fell and communism ended, good capitalists went in and sucked up all the industries and made them their own. He called them all together. When they start to hurt, don't walk by any open windows. Now, here in this country, interesting responses. I grew up, as I said yesterday, during the Cold War, where the one thing that would unite us was our fear, our distrust, and I'm not going to go as far as hatred, but our hatred of, our trained hatred of communism and of Russia. Not the people, but the system of government and all of that. I'm not seeing that kind of drawing together. In fact, the Republican Party is all over the map. You got Mitch McConnell coming out, an old establishment Republican, going, put the pedal to the metal, as bad as sanctions as we can possibly get. That's what we do. And then you got the crazy part of the GOP, the part that's dominating, the Trump part. The new folks who have come out of their hovels, have found their way out of their tinfoil houses. People like this Lauren Witzke. Lauren Witzke was a candidate for U.S. Senate in 2020 from Delaware, who had nothing but praise for Vlad. Now, understand, before I play this clip of her, I have taken a lot of heat from people over the years on being very distrustful of religion, especially hyper religiosity, zealotry, this kind of militance. We're going to produce Christian warriors. I've always been very leery of the Christian extremists. I view them in the same light that I view any extremist, religious extremist. I put them in the same category. Only I think they're worse. Because here in this country, they're well-armed, well-financed, well-connected, and well-ensconced in our military culture. So when I hear Lauren say, well, let me just play this clip, because I think it's one of those things where this is her saying the quiet part out loud. And since Trump has come on the scene, there's been a lot of that kind of, okay, we can be who we are. We can finally just let it out. We can say what we really believe, because there's no more filters. There's no more shame in being a white nationalist. There's no more shame in being a Christian extremist. There's no more shame in hating people like we do. And well, Lauren goes into it a little bit here. So this is the clip of Lauren.
Here's the deal. Also, Russia is a Christian nationalist nation. They're actually Orthodox Christian. I'm Russian Orthodox. So, I actually support Putin's right to protect his people and always put his people first, but also protect their Christian values. I identify more with with Putin's Christian values than I do with Joe Biden. So, there is that. There is that there. Christian nationalist countries also are a threat to the global regime, like the Luciferian regime. It wants to mash everything together, but Putin takes care of his people. He looks out for his people. I watched as he deported, they literally walked them through the streets, the criminal illegals who were coming into their country. Yeah. They walked them out and they escorted them out and they said, get out. I can respect that. I can respect that. And I can respect the fact that Putin does everything he can to protect his people.
What do you say to that? What do you say to the almost orgasmic, oh my God, I love Joe Putin. I love him. I love Joe Putin. What do you say? What do you say to someone who, he's a Christian nationalist. He's one of us. He throws those illegals out because they fetishize this. They fetishize rounding up people that don't look like them. Blonde-haired, blue eyes. Hey, maybe we've heard this before. I'm sure there was a moment in the past where blonde hair, blue eyes was the perfect race. Someone might remind me of that. But here they are saying it out, saying the parts out loud. You got crazy Michelle Bachmann, who I used to joke about because she was kind of fun crazy. She's now gone full on. Oh my God, crazy. She believes that what we saw today in Ukraine was a fake. It wasn't real. It was all fake, hoax. And you've got these religious folks, these hyper-religious people, these people who I don't know what book they're reading. It's an angry book. Like this evangelical preacher, this Lance Walnew. Lance says, it's hard to make Putin the villain if you have all the facts. And what are those facts? Facts are Hillary Clinton and the CIA. They were trying to tear Putin down by here it comes, by bringing in the gays. That's right. We're going to have the flying 3rd Infantry of gay, infiltrators going to go into Canada and undercut the whole thing. And he said that, Putin did the right thing. He clamped down like a good dictator does. This is a religious man talking about a good dictator. And the thing is I can give a bunch of these examples of these crazy religious zealots justifying what Putin is doing because, well, he shares their worldview of extreme national Christianity, extreme white supremacy, extreme homophobia, extreme, well, misogyny as well. I mean, throw that in there too. That's the world. And I've been saying this for years. And I've always gotten, blowback. No, Rick, you're wrong. We're not that country. We're better than that. Christianity's about Jesus. And for most of us, not these people. For these people, it's about power, control, and money. And they control our media narrative. You look at what the Russian state television over at Fox News is doing. This Maria Bartiromo, who I used to love as a reporter. She's now bat blank crazy. She believes that the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, it's concocted by the White House. The White House did this. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, he's done it. He's done all of this. He manipulated all this to happen so that we would stop talking about when Hillary Clinton didn't spy on Donald Trump. Yeah, that concocted nonsense that Fox News brought up. Oh my gosh, the propaganda is so incredible. Now remember, here's the part. Remember, we're told that Joe Biden is weak and feckless, and all of this is his fault, except, well, when he was his people are concocting the war to deviate for Hillary. Don't let common sense or logic come into any of all this, because Fox News viewers don't, Trump supporters don't have any of that stuff. So don't let that bug you, because it's not supposed to. Remember, Biden's weak and feckless, and yet Senate Republicans did everything they could do for the last year plus to not allow the president to seat his people in the State Department or the Pentagon. They've slow-walked every nominee. They've blocked his nominees. But hey, don't talk about that. And it's important to remember also that because of Trump, Mr. I can do it alone, I'm Mr. Fix-It, I can make a bad deal, the State Department was decimated under Trump. Which is why Congress had better get their behind back to Washington immediately and do some work. Break time over, folks. Come back to work. And oh, by the way, for all the talk about NATO, if you remember all of the attempts by Trump to destroy NATO, it appears as it's as strong as it has ever been. And that's because of Joe Biden. Now, what we're watching in real time, what we saw today, and what I watched all day long, was Vladimir Putin's war crimes in real time. Remember, everyone has a cell phone. Everyone is documenting these crimes in real time for you, me, and the rest of the world to see. The question is will people of conscience, will we allow it to go unchecked? Will we allow it to happen and say, oh, well, no harm, no foul? Will we follow these religious freaks who are saying, no, I have more in common with Vladimir Putin than I have with Joe Biden? Again, the other day I brought up the two idiots with the T-shirts. I'd rather be a Russian than a Democrat. Here it is. The silent part out loud. We are watching and hearing all of these crimes. Now, yesterday I talked about Tucker Carlson's quote, where he said, you may ask yourself, since it's getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he ever threatened to fire me or for disagreeing with him? No, he throws journalists out the window. Not bad ones, though, because evidently you'd be okay. But the first part of this is, what's this really about? This is the part that I've been focused on. What is this really about? It's about the legacy, absolutely. It's about getting the old gang back together. It's about bringing, national respect and the shame of the fall of communism and doing away with that. But what it boils down to is really, yesterday he got all of the rich people together. And he said, hey, rich people, they're going to sanction us. We know what they're going to do. It's the only thing they can do. It's what every president we've ever had would do except Donald Trump. which is why Putin wants Trump in the White House. It's what every president would do. It's going to hurt a little bit. So rich people, you okay with a little bit of pain? And here's the pot of gold. Here's what I'm selling. Because what we're seeing is a rich guy pushing poor and working class kids to invade and kill other people's poor and working class kids. Why? So they can steal, rob, steal, pillage. They can get more of everything, more of their energy, more of their wealth, take over that country so they can rob and pillage. It's what this is about. There's no reason to go into Ukraine unless you're there for the pot of gold. If there's nothing there, do you think he cares? If there's no, hey, we don't have to pay them anymore to push the pipeline across, do you think he cares? It's about the money. And Putin's calculus, and this is very, very smart and something I've been talking about for a very long time. He's betting that the working class in this country is going to rise up and not understand that working class and poor working class folks in Russia and in Ukraine are suffering. But our suffering, because we're going to get hit with higher gas prices, we're going to hit higher inflation. There's all kinds of things that are coming. It's not going to be the same kind of pain and struggle and suffering and sacrifice that you're going to see with the Russian working class and the Ukrainian working class. Certainly not the Ukrainian working class. But he's betting that we're going to rise up, be angry, and throw the Democrats out in November so that he can do what? Well, have someone like Donald Trump to deal with in the future. Someone who will apologize. How dare someone ask Vladimir Putin if he interfered in the 2016 election? I have no idea. I asked him. I don't know why he would. I think we're seeing why he would. And, it came up into my mind today. Understand, authoritarian people hate organizing. They hate organizations of working people. They hate working people, which is why I've been saying for the longest time the Republican Party hates working people. It's that simple. Do you really think in Vladimir Putin's world, in the Christian nationalist, white supremacist, homophobic, misogynistic, more for me, greed is good world, do you think they would allow labor unions to exist? Because they don't in Russia. They've got no power. Do you really think that they would allow working people to have any say whatsoever? Because the one thing that tears authoritarian regimes down is organized people, organized workers. Look at Poland and the Solidarity Movement and Lech Walesa. Look at what they were able to accomplish, tearing down that communist system. Putin understands that. So for me, all of this comes down to, and what I said from the very beginning when they started talking about sanctions. What I know from people I've talked to who have lived in countries that have been under sanctions, it's the poor and the working poor and the working class who suffer. The rich people, they're going to be fine. The rich folks they're going to be A-okay. Because, well, if things don't go their way, they oust the leader, they bring someone else in so they can do all right. So this is where Putin's calculus, interesting times for him. But I go back to this crazy woman. The crazy woman who had the audacity to say it out loud. She has more in line with Vladimir Putin than she has with the President of the United States. And she is not alone.
Here's the deal also, Russia is a Christian nationalist nation. They're actually Orthodox Christian and Russian Orthodox. So, I actually support Putin's right to protect his people and always put his people first, but also protect their Christian values. I identify more with with Putin's Christian values than I do with Joe Biden. So, there is that. There is that there. Christian nationalist countries also are a threat to the global regime, like the Luciferian regime. It wants to mash everything together, but Putin takes care of his people. He looks out for his people. I watched as he deported, they literally walked them through the streets, the criminal illegals who were coming into their country. Yeah. They walked them out and they escorted them out and they said, get out. I can respect that. I can respect that. And I can respect the fact that Putin does everything he can to protect his people.
Yeah, he does everything he can do to protect his people, which is why today there were thousands of people in the streets protesting, shocked Russians, as it has been reported, angry over the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. And guess what happened? You had almost 1,800 people in 54 cities who were arrested and detained, at least almost 1,000 of them in Moscow alone. So now my question for all my God-fearing Christian, America first, white supremacist folks who are trucking across the USA. What do you think would happen? Let's play a little game. What do you think would happen if you had Vladimir Putin at the end of that road? What do you think the Russian government would do with your little trucker convoy that's going to come and block up traffic? What do you think would happen? Do you think for a second they would have allowed it to happen as long as Trudeau allowed it to go on in Canada before he listened to the will of the people and broke it up? Do you think? Do you think he'd just left them there indefinitely? Oh, sure, say bad things about me. Even though we know he has locked up and killed dissenters. So tell me, oh God-fearing Christian truckers, please share your wisdom with us. What have the scriptures told you about authoritarians? Now, the craziest thing I've heard, as if that wasn't enough. The dumbest man in the entire United States Senate, guy named Tommy Tuberville. Tommy Tuberville, you may remember Tommy. He was a football coach. Yes, sirree, Bob. Not a very good one either. Kept getting ousted from places. But Tommy, the dumbest guy in Congress, and you would think, spending all those years on a college campus, something might, just, I don't know, fall off a shelf and hit him in the head and go, oh, gee, I learned something today. Maybe, I don't know. But he was being interviewed by this group, 1819 News, and he said that his theory in this is that Vladimir Putin can't feed his people. It's a communist country. So he can't feed his people, and they need more farmland. Oh, my God. The Soviet Union disbanded it in 1991. Where the freak have you been for the last 30 years? There is no communist country left. And there are no stories of the Russian people needing more food. No one's made that. Now, when I was a kid, and we heard of the bread lines, the toilet paper lines, and all, then yeah, that's an argument. But has Tommy been frozen? Is this Rumpelstiltskin? Has he been frozen in time for 30 plus years? And the sad thing is this guy is sitting in the U.S. Senate. If he was just some moron who lost an election like Lauren, whatever her name is, I would go, she's just an idiot. Yeah, it is what it is. It's where we are. This guy is sitting in the U.S. Senate. There is some good news, though. I was a big fan of Vitaly Klitschko when he was a boxer, one tough SOB. I did not know that he is the mayor of Kiev. He has vowed, along with his brother, to take up arms and fight. That, to me, is amazing. Here's a guy who's a millionaire multiple times over, could live anywhere in the world. And he, a patriot to his country. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case Mueller versus Oregon. It was a landmark decision in the realm of protective labor legislation. It restricted the workday to 10 hours for women. Laundry owner Kurt Mueller required his female employees to work more than 10 hours a day against Oregon's labor law. The Supreme Court upheld his conviction and fine. Protective labor legislation was a product of the reform social movements of the progressive era. Reformers like Jane Addams worked to protect women from the industrial dangers that bred physical and moral harm to women. The decision drove a class-based wedge within the women's movement that lasted for much of the 20th century. Working-class women generally supported protective labor legislation like Mueller, but equal rights advocates like Alice Paul opposed it. They argued that protective legislation like Mueller rested on stereotypes regarding the differences between men and women. These differences often fueled anti-women discrimination, state control, and financial dependency. As well, critics remarked the ruling set a precedent for women's biology as childbearers as a basis for separate legislation. Only later would working-class critics note that the ruling did not cover domestics, agricultural workers, or white-collar workers. The 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act would supplant some parts of Mueller with its guarantees for workers of both sexes. Many working-class women would later welcome the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, which prohibited employment discrimination. Some would concede the many flaws of protective labor legislation that held women back. But women's rights advocates would continue to debate protective legislation and the Equal Rights Amendment well into the 1970s.
Can antibiotic medicines, long hailed as miracle drugs, be too much of a good thing? Yes. Two factors are at work here. First, bacteria, one of the earliest forms of life on Earth, are miracles in their own right, with a stunning ability to outsmart the antibiotic drugs through rapid evolution. Second is the rather dull inclination of us supposedly superior humans to overuse and misuse antibiotic medicines. Every time we take an antibiotic to kill some bad bacteria that is infecting our bodies, a few of the infectious germs are naturally resistant to the drug. So they survive, multiply, and become a colony of superbugs that antibiotics can't touch. Multiply this colony by the jillions of doses prescribed for everything from deadly staph infections to the common cold, and we get the, quote, antibiotic paradox. The more we use them, the less effective they become, for they're creating a spreading epidemic of immune superbugs. A big cause of this is the push by drug companies to get patients and doctors to reach for antibiotics as a cure-all. For example, millions of doses a year are prescribed for children and adults who have common colds, flu, sore throats, etc. Nearly all of these infections are caused by viruses, which cannot, repeat, cannot be cured with antibiotics. Taking an antibiotic for a cold is as useless as taking a heart drug for heartburn. The antibiotics will do nothing for your cold, but it will help establish drug-resistant superbugs in your body. That's not a smart trade-off. This is Jim Hightower saying, in fact, it's incomprehensibly stupid. Antibiotics are invaluable medicines we need for serious, life-threatening illnesses, but squandering them on sore throats has already brought us to the brink of superbugs that are resistant to everything. That's the nightmare of all nightmares.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I got to tell you, I'm still in this place, dumbest guy in the Senate, Tommy Tuberville, because, hey, you know, Russia's a communist country who needs food. Oh, my gosh. But again, you know, while I think, I still think that's the stupidest thing. I can't not, for the life of me, I can't get this woman out of my head.
Here's the deal also, you know, Russia is a Christian nationalist nation. They're actually Orthodox Christian and Russian Orthodox. So, you know, I actually support Putin's right to protect his people and always put his people first.
Yep, always. She protects Putin at all costs. And, hey, she's got more in common with Vlad than she's got with Biden. And again, like I said yesterday, and I've said a couple of times, those two idiots in Ohio with I'd rather be Russian than Democrat shirts, they aren't the outlier. There are a lot of them. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, the website where you can find her incredible work. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you as well. So what do you think of this former senatorial candidate from Delaware saying, no, I've got more in common with Vlad than I've got with Joe Biden because, hey, Vlad, he takes those illegals and they throw them out. And, you know, he believes what we believe.
No, he doesn't. And I would love to see some of these people try and survive in Russia. Like the second they step into the country and start thinking that they can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, it's just like, oh, honey,
right?
You're going to get, hauled into prison and sucks to be you. But that's basically the way that Putin treats people.
Because I asked the question, this trucker convoy. Yesterday, there was the guy he was the single trucker convoy. He was all by himself. What a moron. Illegal in numerous places, but that's another thing. I said, let's say those guys find their way to D.C. like that guy couldn't. And they block the road. They surround the Capitol. What do you think someone like Putin would do in that environment? You think they'd wait as long as Trudeau did in Canada? No, you'd be there like 15 minutes going, you're moving along, and you're moving along now.
Well, the good news is there's no way that they're getting into D.C. because they staged a whole bunch of assault trucks at the off-ramp. So if they tried to get into D.C., they would be blocked from getting anywhere near the Capitol, which is always nice, helpful, super helpful to have your DOT folks out there. But yeah, Putin would totally just cut their heads off. And the idea that somehow Russia is this safe, wonderful country and Republicans are praising it, it makes me think kind of about the Iraq war whenever we started this whole thing, and where most of us were protesting that, being like that they had nothing to do with Afghanistan and all of the things that ended up being true. And because we were protesting for peace, they called us unpatriotic. And so now you actually have these people who are trashing America. They're trashing the United States, and they're praising this crazy dictator. And I'm just like, even at the point where I hated George W. Bush as much as everybody, I still was not trashing my country. And that surprises me. That's where the Republican Party has gone. And at that point, you really kind of are just being like, you know what? I'll buy you the ticket.
No, and this is where you go, is it just a matter of social media has created an environment where no matter what the other person does, we have to take the other side. So this is Joe Biden, so we automatically have to take the other side, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of mindset. Or is it that they truly, and this is where I'm at, I think the religious community in this country has bought into the Christian nationalism that this woman was talking about, the homophobia, the misogyny, all of this old school kind of hyper religiosity. I believe there's a large segment in this country that bought that, and Trump really brought that out of them to come public with it. But I'm curious your thought.
So I'm of two minds on this. Yes, I think that is definitely a big piece of it, where they have just joined that conservative far-right ideology that matches what Putin is and Russian Orthodoxy is. And but the other piece of this is I'm not sure it's exclusive to social media so much as it has been such a huge portion of what Fox News has talked about, the Fox network. Nobody should ever say Fox News again. Let's call it the Fox network. What Fox and Newsmax and OAN have been saying for like the last several months. And it's weird because they're trashing Biden as being weak compared to Putin, but at the same time they're saying that we're wrong for being strong. So against Russia, and it's just everything that they have that they're promoting around this whole Russia thing is just it's so contradictory. Because even in the case of Donald Trump, you have him saying, this would never happen under me, and yet he's also saying that what Putin is doing is amazing, right? That it's savvy. So if it's so great, then why would it never happen under you?
It's genius.
It just doesn't.
And the thing that
there's so much contradiction.
Right, and the thing that my Republican friends seem to forget is, the reason that this is happening, this response is happening, is because we're part of NATO that Trump wanted to get us out of and wanted to destroy, which is why, again, Putin wanted him in place in the first place, because he doesn't want an expansion of NATO. He wants to be able to get the old gang back together.
Well, that, and he pulled us out of the anti-nuclear deal with
Iran,
Russia. What else did we do? He just did a whole bunch of stuff that basically just undermined all of the things that could get us here. I do think part of it is that we, as a country, did not respond strong enough whenever Putin took Crimea. But I think, beyond that, for what, like 4 years, Donald Trump ran the show and was kowtowing to Vladimir Putin and letting him do whatever he wanted, and giving him all of these instructions for
But here again, you said we didn't react strong enough when Putin took Crimea, and I've argued, what more could Obama have done when you had a Republican Party who was hell bent on hoping he fails, on making sure he was a one-term president, on blocking every bit of his agenda. He did the smart thing. He threw it back to Congress and said, okay, what are we going to do? And they dithered. They did nothing. John Boehner did nothing. So to drop it all on Obama's lap, that's kind of revisionist history. Now he was president.
What Joe Biden has done this time that I feel like is different and absolutely amazing is that he has brought a global community of people together, like every single nation, other than China, who's out there hiding under their beds. Every single nation is behind this. We are the most unified the world has ever been. With every country, you've got Mexico saying that they're going to do sanctions. You've got all of the EU. The UK has come out saying, we're going to hit the oligarchs hard. Everybody's really sort of, it's not just the lip service anymore. And everybody has said, this is the line, you cross the line, and that's it. That's game over. And that has been so much of who I feel like Biden as a statesman has always been, where, his foreign policy relationships has always been like a really big part of the things that we love about him.
Right.
Is, he's been here forever. He knows these people. And I guess for the last several weeks, he's been working the phones and pulling everybody together in a way that, we haven't seen since.
But he's weak and feckless, Sarah. He's weak and feckless. He's ineffectual. He's dithering. He's, all the things we hear on the propaganda network over at Fox. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com. That's where you find her work. If you're just joining us, make sure you download the podcast. Never miss a second. This way you can go back and find out all the wonderful things Sarah just said, so you get a little bit of information. CPAC going on, Sarah. Crazy pack. Perfect time for crazy people to come together in Florida while Putin is invading Ukraine. The big story today, however, Ted Cruz, weak, pathetic, afraid of Peppermint Patty, evidently called Jen Psaki Peppermint Patty. Correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't all the boys in the gang afraid of Peppermint Patty? Wasn't she the tough?
Yes, exactly. She was basically the muscle for Marcy, and the best thing that Jen Psaki said in response to it was, "Oh, cool, thanks, I love her," which basically just lets all the air out of Ted Cruz's tires, presuming he had any to begin with. But the CPAC people, like, this is the worst kind of programming, side-by-side programming that, for a Republican Party that's really trying to figure out how to navigate the far right and everybody else, putting these two things side by side with a CPAC group praising Putin all weekend during this invasion while Americans are watching, cities burn. It's just really, it's the worst possible picture that you could make for the GOP, and it's entirely of their own creation.
Yeah, the question I have is, will they bring back the golden Trump Buddha? Will you be able to take pictures with the golden Trump Buddha?
I'm shocked that they don't have a golden Putin this year.
Or with him on the horse. I'll bet you could see.
Right?
I bet you could get autograph pictures.
My favorite thing that came out in the last couple hours was that Anonymous, came out of the woodwork and said, we're going to do a cyber attack against Russia. And I was like, oh, please, like, spread a bunch of nude pictures of Putin everywhere with a micro wiener, and just make
I
him
want the
look
P-tape.
completely.
I want the P-tape.
Yes, like all of these things. Please go out there, go forth, and make this amazing. So my friend wants to see them spread a rumor that Putin actually died, because then he would have to acknowledge that they were hacked by coming out and saying, no, I'm not dead. There's just like a no-win situation, which I think is smart. I think
here's the funny thing, though, and should I say funny? Yeah, I'm going to go funny. Here's the funny thing. If this invasion doesn't go right, that might be an accurate assessment, because if the oligarchs are going to take all of this pain and they're going to lose some stuff, I don't know. And especially, with the fact that it doesn't seem to be all that popular with the folks there in Russia right now. There are already protests going on, because I think those people understand sanctions means pain and suffering for the working class, not just in Russia, but in Ukraine as well, and here. And this is where I come back to, when do we wake up to the reality that these oligarchs, these rich people, don't give a rat's behind about working people in any country? I say all the time, Republicans hate working people. Hate them here, hate them there, hate them everywhere.
And I would recommend, too, if you get on Twitter and do the search term oligarch yacht, that is particularly lovely. You can look at where all of the oligarchs are around the world, because people are taking pictures of their yachts and trying to alert anybody who's doing sanctions. Oh, here they are. Please, by all means, seize their yacht.
No, and this is an interesting point. Because I started today's show off by going, look, we live in a different era. All of the war crimes are being recorded and broadcast in real time.
Yes.
And this is where, having these little communication devices in our pocket in real time could be a real thorn in the oligarch's pocket, which may, I'm not saying it's going to, but may be the end of the Putin.
That is what has been lovely. And I think that Putin is probably going to he's going to be in a position where he's going to have to shut down social media sites. That's the only way that this is going to work, because you saw footage from St. Petersburg tonight with hundreds and hundreds of people protesting. And the picture that I saw of somebody sort of standing back in the crowd was basically every person holding up their phone, shooting what the massive crowd looks like. And that is just the worst possible PR for Putin. And he can't censor that on Twitter and Facebook. So he's going to have to go full China.
But like a good authoritarian, he's going to try and do it. And like a good authoritarian, Donald Trump and Truth Social, and I'm sure you've seen this, the good folks over at the brand new Truth Social, who have had no bugs whatsoever in their rollout of their site. Evidently, anyone who has a bad word about Devin Nunes, if you mock him, his mother, his cow, anything, you will be banned from Truth Social from now till eternity. Now remember, these are the people who said we're not going to ban, we're not going to censor. Already, what is this, day 3? We're banning people from mocking Devin Nunes,
which is tragic, because I feel like the one thing that really connects everybody is how much everyone likes to make fun of Devin Nunes. That is a truly most universal piece of America right now. It's how everybody just thinks it's so much fun to mock him, because it's Devin Nunes. I'm waiting for the press release of him not getting paid and suing Trump because he didn't get paid. You know it's going to happen. My favorite story about Truth Social was that someone else created something that was called Truth Social, and so all of these Trumpers had accidentally downloaded the wrong app. And so that app went gangbusters one day, and it explains why Trump is not doing as well with downloads.
Now I got to wonder what I got, because I now have to wonder what I got, because I only see a handful of people on there, because I'm looking at the insanity, and it's the same, it's the same rabbit hole kind of, incestuous pool of I don't even know the right word. It's so bad that I don't even know the right.
It is a cesspool.
Yeah, I mean,
it is a cesspool of sadness, is what it is, and it's just as bad as Getter and, what are the other ones?
Grab,
Parler, Grab, Gab, Nab,
whatever.
But
Scab.
yeah, like I'm shocked that it hasn't really had a better launch, because I feel like Trump used to have all of these amazing communication strategies, and PR and public facing was such a big part of who he was, and it's just really, it looks so terrible.
Yeah, he's kind of busy though,
now.
Sarah. I mean, he's
apparently
busy.
have you heard about the logo thing? Apparently they stole the logo from some trucking company in Great Britain who's going to sue them.
Nice.
I mean, there's just like no success here. It's really bad.
But in Trump's defense, he's been busy. And I thought yesterday was going to be a good day for him, as two of the prosecutors in New York resigned. But evidently today, the news has gone the other way. They're asking more people to come in. They're evidently going to go forward. So that elation of yesterday, oh, it might be over. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think that was a big reason why those two prosecutors stepped up, is they were like, okay, if you're not going to charge Trump, and we really think that you should, then we're going to blow this up all over, the internet and the news. And that's exactly what happened, is that these two prosecutors were willing to, stage their careers and their reputations on the fact that they think that this case could be won, or at the very least, he should be charged.
Amazing stuff. Last question I've got for you. Senator Snowball, evidently it's rumored, is going to be resigning. We got any information on what's up with the Snowball?
Perhaps he finally has hit his head too many times. I have heard for a very long time that he is not, woohoo, he's a little not there. So I don't know if it's, he's finally reached his limit and they can't hide it from people anymore, or maybe there is something seriously wrong with him. But he seems like the kind of guy who was ready to die in the chair on the floor, but I just don't think his mind is there enough for him to be able to campaign and maintain his seat.
Yeah, it's time. It's time for Inhofe to go. And look, I say the same thing about
long past time.
Yeah, long past. But I've been saying the same thing about Dianne Feinstein as well. And I know I'll get pushback from that, but it's time for her to go as well. Yeah,
I agree. I completely agree. And that has no better evidence than whenever she did the Amy Coney Barrett hearing and stepped back from all of the evidence that was sent to her about Kavanaugh too. So, I'm over that. I'm over her.
It's crazy. Oh, I did want to ask you one more thing real quick. Evidently there's a list of lobbyists running around and this is one of my problems with what happens in this country, that we allow foreign countries to lobby our Congress. We allow adversaries to come and lobby our Congress. But someone has compiled a list of all the lobbyists that are known, that are doing Putin's work here in our halls of power, lobbying our representatives, which is how you get a Tommy Tuberville, which is how you get some of these people who are way off the fringe and apologizing for what Putin's doing. Tell me a little more.
So there's an amazing corruption watchdog that has been monitoring lobbyists who are getting their money from Russia to basically lobby for trade issues, for oil and gas, for big pharma, all of the things. And so he posted the list of all of the people who were doing it and who they were affiliated with. And, I think that's one of the, if you're going to talk about sanctions, like if we're really going to talk about shutting down Russian banks and the oligarchs, like you really have to go all the way. Yeah. There cannot be anybody who is trying to buy Americans from Russia anymore, or anywhere else for that matter.
No, it's interesting times indeed. But Sarah, I appreciate you taking time for us, sharing your incredible work. Hope folks will take a look at it over at RawStory.com. Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well. If you missed any of the program or just joining us, make sure you download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So it's still Black History Month, and I hope folks will take a look at our podcast series for Black History Month. Lots and lots of stories there of things that we found during our civil rights tour, things that we came across. Highly suggest downloading that podcast so you can take the program wherever you go. And look, on this Russia front, the Republican Party is showing who their true colors. This is that moment to find out which side they're on. I've said for a very long time they're an anti-worker party, they're an anti-American party, they're an authoritarian party. These are people who are pro-fascist, or the best one I saw today was fascist curious. This is who they are. And this election cycle, I'm hoping Republicans are paying attention to your party. Take your party back to somewhere near the sane line. Having someone as dumb as Tommy Tuberville saying that it's a communist country and that they need food and that's the reason this is happening is literally insane. It is literally the dumbest thing that you could possibly say outside of, I have more in common with Vladimir Putin than I have with President Joe Biden. But this is who they are. So my Republican listeners and friends, which side are you on? Democracy or autocracy? Which one? Do you want a strong man leading the country? And when your little trucker rally gets to D.C., they club you, throw you in jail, and do all the things that you claim are happening to your political prisoners. Those criminals who attacked our Capitol on January 6th. Now's the time. Again, if you missed any of the program, podcast, ricksmithshow.com is where you get that, or wherever you get your podcasts, from iHeart to iTunes to Stitcher to Podbean and everywhere in between. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Nord Stream 2 will not, as I promised, will not move forward.
Germany agrees. Pulls plug on Russia's critical gas pipeline. Fourth tropical cyclone in 4 weeks batters Madagascar. U.S. fracking industry is curtailing production to goose fossil fuel prices.
Even more?
Plus, Dakota Access Pipeline developer loses bid to block new environmental assessment.
All of those losers and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Cheap oil is a deterrent from tyrannical third world dictators from invading other countries. Could it be that Greta Thunberg and Leonardo DiCaprio actually might be to blame for what Vladimir Putin is doing?
No, it could not. And her name is Thunberg.
That's a take you will not hear anywhere else.
For good reason, Charlie Kirk, you dunderhead. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, normally we would think your lead would be in Russia and Germany today, but nope, climate change is moving us across the world.
Yes, it is. Compounding tragedy in Madagascar off the coast of eastern Africa. Madagascar was hit with the 4th tropical cyclone in just 4 weeks on Tuesday, intensifying an ongoing humanitarian crisis. The back-to-back cyclones have killed at least 200 and left hundreds of thousands homeless in one of the poorest countries in the world.
That's back-to-back to back-to-back cyclones.
Yes, the United Nations warns Madagascar is facing the world's first climate change famine caused directly by man-made global warming due to years of unrelenting drought. Here in the U.S., AP reports that in California, which is mired in its 3rd year of severe drought, federal water managers said this week they can't deliver any water from reservoirs to farmers in the state's biggest agricultural region. That will force some to plant fewer crops in a region that supplies the bulk of the nation's fruits, nuts, and vegetables.
Maybe plant fewer almonds, which take up an inordinate amount of water.
Correct. In other news, fossil fuel prices were already spiking on global markets to their highest level since 2014 due to rising demand and tight supplies. So it certainly didn't help when Russian President Vladimir Putin intensified aggressive actions toward neighboring Ukraine.
Well, it depends who you say it didn't help.
That, in turn, triggered the U.S. and Europe to initiate sanctions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has indefinitely halted certification of the controversial $11 billion Nord Stream 2 methane gas pipeline from Russia. Potential additional EU actions could include banking restrictions impeding Russia's ability to export its oil and gas, a pillar of the Russian economy, that could further curtail global supply. Everyone is bracing for higher energy prices, especially Europe, which is dependent on Russia for about 40% of its oil and gas.
Maybe that was never a good idea.
Well, on Wednesday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that Europe has sufficient supplies to get through the winter, and she said Russia's actions have underscored the risk of relying on Russian fossil fuels. She said the EU will accelerate its shift to clean energy.
This crisis shows that Europe is still too dependent on Russian gas. We have to diversify our supplies. We will have to massively invest in renewable energy. That's where the future is, because this is a strategic investment in our energy independence.
President Biden on Wednesday also slapped sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and said the administration will take measures to mitigate the economic impact on Americans from higher fossil energy prices, which Republicans hope to make a political problem for Biden and congressional Democrats in the critical midterm elections in November.
Because of course they do. Hey, there may be war and tens of thousands of people killed, but it's great political news for us.
Higher prices mean higher profits for the oil and gas industry, but it's not just Russia's actions causing fossil fuel prices to jump. A new report by the American Prospect finds that after flooding the market for a decade, now the oil and gas fracking industry in the U.S. is restricting production intentionally to goose prices in order to return more cash to investors.
Naturally.
Finally, a sliver of good news. The U.S. Supreme Court has rejected an attempt by the the owner of the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline to block a new environmental review. The pipeline is opposed by nearby Native American tribes because of the threat of a spill to their drinking water supply. Energy Transfer's pipeline has been operating without a permit while the new assessment is underway, which the company has previously said leaves the pipeline vulnerable to being shut down.
Our Supreme Court blocked the challenge?
Yeah.
Our packed and stolen Supreme Court?
Yep.
Are you okay, Supreme Court? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. This has been your Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Recently, the organization Transparency International, they came out with their annual report, and we've talked about this before. Their corruption perception index. This scores countries all around the world, some 180 countries all over the globe, to see just how corrupt they're perceived. Not how corrupt they actually are, I guess, but how we perceive them as corrupt. Now, I've got friends who truly believe the U.S. government is the most corrupt government in the entire world. That's because they don't really look even across the street. But, that's what they think. And here to share some thoughts of, well, where do we in the U.S. align with the rest of the world when it comes to the perception of corruption? That's why I have asked Scott Greytak to come talk with us. Scott is the Director of Advocacy over at Transparency International. Their website, us.transparency.org. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to chat with you, Rick.
So let's start right there. Get the big question out of the way first. Everybody I know thinks the U.S. government's the most corrupt ever. They're horrible. They're criminals. They're all thieves. How bad are we compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, well, when you zoom out, I mean, the big picture is we're not doing well recently. We are still, when you look at every country around the world, our index measures corruption, 180 countries and territories. We are still heads above the rest of the world, though the news this year is that the U.S. has fallen out of the top 25, and we are at a score that is an all-time low since our standards and our formula for doing the scores were reconfigured in 2012. So we were basically on a backslide since 2015. We've stopped the bleeding. The score has stabilized, but it's still the lowest point we've been in the last decade.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I lived through the 4 years of the former guy. And on Inauguration Day 2017, I said, get ready for it. This is going to be the most corrupt government of my lifetime. And Donald Trump, to his credit, he did not fail me in making sure that my prediction was true. But I think Biden has done a really good job. I think there's been a lot of push to try and clean things up. There's talk of stopping Congress people and senators from buying stock and insider trading stuff, something that I've been talking about for years. Seems like we're going in the right direction, and I think it sounds like we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the Biden administration supported the big voting rights bill, H.R. 1, right, which had campaign finance reform, things to clean up the mess we got after the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United that allows corporations to buy elections. It had gerrymandering reforms in there, ethics pieces. I mean, it really was a comprehensive, powerful bill. Unfortunately, Congress wasn't able to get it over the finish line. But over the last year, we have seen a lot of great leadership from the Biden administration. I mean, they passed a law that outlaws anonymous shell companies, which bad guys from all over the world use to steal money from their people and to funnel it and to launder it outside of their countries, often into the United States. They also designated the fight against corruption as a national security priority. That's never been done before in the United States. And they convened the U.S. Summit for Democracy just a couple of months ago, bringing together dozens of countries from around the world and talking about the fight against corruption as a key policy point.
Yeah, and I would argue that part of that has to do with the situation we're in today. I mean, you look at Russia, which I viewed for a very long time as a criminal state, run by oligarchs who are basically thieves who stole from the working class of that country at the end of the fall of the Soviet Union, and they created, along with American oligarchs, their kleptocrat class, and they're the ones who are controlling everything. And where we're in this moment, working class people in all three countries, in Russia, Ukraine, and here in the U.S., we're gonna be the one that pay the brunt of it, not them. So I think it's important that we follow these people, which is why I'm glad to see the yachts that people are taking pictures of the Russians in all these different places, because we got to get drilled down to find this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to give you a sense, just by the numbers, basically a little over 100 billionaires in Russia own a third of that country's entire wealth. So the United States has very serious income and wealth inequality, but it pales in comparison to what the Russian ruling class and Putin's circle of cronies have been able to amass for themselves. My organization has estimated that the people of Russia lose about $300 billion a year to corruption, to bribery, to having to pay bribes to this regime in power. That's like 5% of their GDP. It is a definitional part of how Russia governs its country. They basically extract from their own people, and they finance these aggressive campaigns like we're seeing this week in Ukraine through that corrupt, dirty money financing. But it's important to point out that the West is complicit in this as well, because part of that corruption scheme is the ability of these Russian officials to take money and to move it out of the country and to hide it, to stash it in safe economies that will grow that money so that they can live well off of the money they're taking for their people. And that's not possible if it's not the complicity of banks, including American banks, if it's not Americans who provide services like legal services, corporate formation services, accounting services to help these folks move their money into the United States, keep it safe, and grow it here. So we have a role in what's happening on the other side of the world as well.
No, if you've been to southern Florida, you see that front and center. The Russian money that basically took over South Florida is right on display. And don't forget Delaware, don't forget South Dakota. I mean, we did look at the Panama and the Pandora Papers. And there's this moment now where you go, is this where we start hunting this stuff down and cutting off that money and returning it to the working class of this world? I mean, because we've had a massive redistribution of wealth, as you've pointed out, a massive, not even redistribution, a massive theft from the working class of this country, not just in Russia, but here as well, that I think at some point has to be returned.
There's no question about that. I mean, look, when you have a building go up in your community, and this isn't New York City and just Miami and Beverly Hills, this is Cleveland, my hometown. This is places in the Midwest, smaller cities, when you have office buildings going up or big commercial centers going up that lie vacant because they are basically vehicles for foreign kleptocrats to park their stolen money and to grow that money. You know, in Warren, Ohio, there was a steel mill that was bought out by an oligarch who basically didn't pay health insurance. There were all kinds of potential environmental code violations, safety violations, and the place ended up going under. And those are real, actual, everyday Americans who lost their jobs because that property was able to be acquired, owned, and then run into the ground by a foreign oligarch. And the people who helped him do it were American service providers. They didn't do their due diligence to make sure where that money was coming from, and that was the outcome.
Or I would argue, and I know you're going to give people the benefit of the doubt, I'm probably a little more jaded than you are. I would say not that they didn't do their due diligence. They were diligent, all right, diligently lining their own pockets.
Well, we need laws that make them ask those questions. And that's part of what my organization is doing, is asking Congress to require that if you're an attorney, you're an accountant, you're a person setting up a company, you're an investment advisor, if you're someone who serves as a gatekeeper to the U.S. financial system, one way or the other, you have to ask those questions. So you can no longer hide behind plausible deniability and say, well, I had no idea that this person who had high-level connections to the Russian government or a foreign government had public allegations of corruption against them, had money coming from offshore funds and foreign banks and was politically connected. Well, that didn't raise enough suspicion that I didn't take their money and go ahead and move it. We're trying to change that and make it a requirement they do.
There's a group right now that's going around on Twitter that it's pointed out all of the lobbyist groups that Putin uses to lobby our government. And this is another one of those things that, we're the only country in the world that allows foreign adversaries to lobby our government, and the amount of money that goes into it. And, you think about all the things that we've heard over the last several years from 2015 forward with all, basically, the Russian money taking over the NRA, all of the attacks on our democracy during the election in 2016. And it all comes back down to this stolen, this criminal money that's gone into this. And it seems to me, and I don't want to get you involved in this, but it seems to me one party has really bought into it heavily and been bought and paid for in this whole process, and it's our friends on the Republican Party. Because why else does Ron Johnson go to Moscow on July 4th? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, I'll tell you, there are former high-ranking officials from Republican and Democrat administrations who do this. They put themselves out as lobbyists for foreign interests, including interests that are adversarial to the U.S. government. And they basically allow them to be on their payroll to lobby on their behalf. This is something that is not unique to one. Maybe there are more high-profile examples recently on behalf of former Republican administration officials, but it is certainly not the case. And there are actually bills in Congress that are supported by Republicans and Democrats to try and shut this revolving door between public service and working for foreign adversaries. It's actually one of the best parts of bipartisanship we can find now is cutting off these ties of foreign influence in nonprofits, colleges, universities, in our campaign finance system, and in the ability of them to take these high-level officials, former generals, former members of Congress, former political appointees in high policy-making positions, and have them as hired guns who come back and cash in on those relationships, who cash in on the public trust that we gave them in order to advance an agenda that is literally in opposition to the U.S.'s.
Yeah, I think of Rudy Giuliani doing lobbying work for the Mujahideen Khalq, who were on our terror list at the time. You just go, I don't know how you forgive that, and I don't even know why people aren't in jail for it. You listen to the Rick Smith Show, where it's Scott Greytak. Scott is the director of advocacy at the Transparency International Group here in the U.S. Their website, us.transparency.org. They've got a new report out, just released recently. Corruption Perceptions Index. They put this out every year, looking at the 180 countries around the world and just how corrupt they are perceived to be. We'll get links out on social media on how you can take a look at that. If you're just joining us, make sure you download the podcast so you don't miss anything that we talk about, especially here. Now, let's ask the other question. Who is the most corrupt country in the world? We've established that we're not bad. We're getting better, fortunately, thanks to Joe Biden and some of the bipartisanship that's going on. Who's the worst?
So at the bottom of the list, unfortunately, it's countries that are dealing with even outright violent conflict or have been reeling from violent conflict, changes in government. Countries like South Sudan, Syria, Somalia. These are places that have been defined by social unrest and upheaval in their countries. So they remain at the bottom of the list. At the top of the list are countries like Finland, Denmark, New Zealand. Typically Western European countries tend to score better. Countries in the Americas tend to score better than those in Africa. And those trends have been pretty consistent. But again, the Corruption Perceptions Index basically gauges, we obviously can't go to governments themselves and say, hey, how corrupt are you? And then use those scores. Turns out you wouldn't get very good data.
Yeah.
So instead, we have to turn to experts and business people who work in those climates. And so we aggregate 13 different sources of information. So it's pretty diversified where we get it from. Private, companies who do this kind of work, organizations like the World Economic Forum, The Economist, African Development Bank. We aggregate all of it, we standardize it. And so we think it gives a pretty clean top-line look at what corruption looks like. But these countries that tend to do well, including the United States, what we're not capturing is the role that I was explaining earlier, where we will be taking this dirty money through our banks, through enablers here, and cleaning it and working its way into our financial system, and so allowing these bad guys overseas to get away with their crimes. So even though we may have a relatively clean score, and countries like Denmark and New Zealand, et cetera, have relatively high scores, that's only because it does not take into account this dirty money, illicit financial flows concept of corruption. So we have a separate piece that we call Trouble at the Top, where we look at those top performing countries and we show how they are actually deeply involved and integral to broader transnational corruption schemes.
So basically, our rich people are ensuring that the more corrupt states, the more corrupt countries remain corrupt to feed their greed. Is that what I'm getting out of this?
There are American service providers who make money by not asking questions and accepting money and, turning a blind eye to what could be the great suffering of people in other parts of the world.
Color me shocked that our greed would cause other people misery, because I look at what's going on in Ukraine, and for me, this is all about greed. It's all about Putin going, hey, there's a pot of gold to be had here, and the oligarchs in that country going, yep, we're going to go and we're going to plunder and we're going to steal and rob from the working class there. And again, it's going to be the working class people in Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. are going to suffer and struggle over this, which is why at some point I hope organizations like yours get the attention that is needed, and that we want to clean things up so that we hold these oligarchs in check and we start locking some of these criminals up.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, there are a couple really exciting proposals that the Biden administration is working on right now. One would go after how this dirty money makes its way through U.S. real estate. There's a rule that's being proposed by Treasury right now that would say, how do we crack down on this money that's being stolen from other parts of the world and funneled into U.S. real estate all over the country, not specific to big cities? We think that there's a program right now that requires some transparency and some reporting about this money and who's behind these companies that are buying up and moving money into the United States. We think there needs to be greater transparency. That program needs to be made permanent, expanded. There's a real opportunity right now to crack down on one of the primary ways that this dirty money gets into the United States, and that we are indirectly facilitating the stability of regimes like Putin with the disastrous and bloody consequences that he's able to carry out in days like today.
Yeah, so in this moment, we need to make sure that we pass the Crook Act. I love that, the Crook Act, because, well, we've got a bunch of criminals. The Countering Russian and Other Overseas Kleptocracy Act, that is a great name.
There's something in a catchy name. I didn't come up with it, but if it turns heads, yeah, stick with it.
So when you call your representative, you call your senator, we want to pass the Crook Act, because we got to go get those crooks. But Scott, good stuff as always. I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Last question I've got for you, in looking at what's going on in Ukraine, a lot of people have said, but Rick, Ukraine's just as corrupt as Russia is. It's all bad. We shouldn't be there. All of this stuff. What's the argument for, it's not as bad as we're being sold?
Well, I mean, if you look at our corruption perceptions index, Ukraine is doing better than Russia. But I mean, you're right. It's struggling after the legacy of having been a part of the Soviet Union and a corrupt state, and only just in the last 8 years being able to move partially out of significant Russian influence. So it's technically thought of as a hybrid regime. They do not have strong rule of law institutions there. It's a relatively fragile democracy. The United States has obviously invested, along with other European partners, a lot of resources, a lot of time and attention to stabilizing and building up that democracy in order to make it, as clean as it can be. But it is struggling. It's in an extremely challenging part of the world, as we're seeing this week.
Yeah.
But the people there who want a free and democratic Ukraine, my organization stands with them, and that is the kind of bright future that could see corruption reduced, eliminated in their country. It is not one that is governed one way or another by an authoritarian, kleptocratic Russia.
Good stuff, Scott. I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you. Please come back again real soon to join us and talk again.
I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks so much.
Good stuff, Scott Greytak. Make sure you check out their website, us.transparency.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Scott's the director of advocacy there at Transparency International. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Right back after this. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a Teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
No, for me, the biggest part of that segment that I think should be taken is, well, we're not as bad as everyone seems to believe we are, because we still have a democratic process, this idea of self-governance, of for and by we the people, some bit of transparency, because we still have, for now, elections that matter. Not as many as I would like. If you look at the last numbers that came out of the 335 congressional districts that are currently drawn, only 27 of them were actually competitive. I mean, that's downright crazy. But in the conversation with Scott, for me, the thing that I think is really important is, as we talked about, lobbyists doing work on the behalf of foreign interests, both friendly and adversarial, while average everyday working people here don't have lobbyists going to fight for them, which is why we see, factories closing down, which is why we see outsourcing happening, why we see tax breaks going to these big companies, not just here in the U.S., but all over the world. Why we have bad trade policies that encourage companies to produce overseas, bring things back, and then, oh, by the way, send the profits overseas. If there's something to be outraged about, and look, I would love nothing more than a trucker convoy for justice, a trucker convoy for sanity. I would love nothing more than a working class uprising of people saying the game has been rigged for way too long and we're tired of it. We're stepping up, we're speaking out, we're demanding better. We've earned it. We've paid for it. We've struggled for it. And I look at this moment where we're in, where, we had all of these years where we were going to benefit from that peace dividend, not just here in the U.S., but in Russia as well. There was going to be that moment of democracy and shared wealth, and people were finally, we sold them capitalism because they believed there were blue jeans everywhere. America was the land of plenty. And working class people in both countries have struggled. And who keeps getting wealthier and wealthier? Our oligarchs, our kleptocrats, the folks who will steal from your labor and then tell you, well, you're just not working hard enough. Interesting times as indeed. But we can change things. And this is where I keep coming back to. If we just were to put down some of our divisions. I don't know how we do this in the moment that we're in. I really don't. I don't know how you get from someone literally coming out and without shame or irony saying that I have more in common with Vladimir Putin than I have with Joe Biden in this country. I don't know how you do that. And I don't know how you reach that person. And she's not alone. I'll tell you, I know a lot of people who have that same kind of extreme religiosity, militant religion, militant Christianity. The kind of people that you really could see blowing things up, like abortion clinics. The kind of people who would storm a Capitol and kill policemen and stab them with flags. You could see that happening. Oh, wait, it did. And these are the same people who are driving across the country saying that those criminals of January 6th, they're patriots. They're heroes. They're political prisoners. What kind of lunacy is that? It's the Christian right in this country. The people who believe Vladimir Putin is their guy. Amazing stuff. You're just joining us. Make sure you grab the podcast. TheRickSmithShow.com is where you get it. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Can antibiotic medicines, long hailed as miracle drugs, be too much of a good thing? Yes. Two factors are at work here. First, bacteria, one of the earliest forms of life on Earth, are miracles in their own right, with a stunning ability to outsmart the antibiotic drugs through rapid evolution. Second is the rather dull inclination of us supposedly superior humans to overuse and misuse antibiotic medicines. Every time we take an antibiotic to kill some bad bacteria that is infecting our bodies, a few of the infectious germs are naturally resistant to the drug. So they survive, multiply, and become a colony of superbugs that antibiotics can't touch. Multiply this colony by the jillions of doses prescribed for everything from deadly staph infections to the common cold, and we get the, quote, antibiotic paradox. The more we use them, the less effective they become, for they're creating a spreading epidemic of immune superbugs. A big cause of this is the push by drug companies to get patients and doctors to reach for antibiotics as a cure-all. For example, millions of doses a year are prescribed for children and adults who have common colds, flu, sore throats, etc. Nearly all of these infections are caused by viruses, which cannot be cured with antibiotics. Taking an antibiotic for a cold is as useless as taking a heart drug for heartburn. The antibiotics will do nothing for your cold, but it will help establish drug-resistant superbugs in your body. That's not a smart trade-off. This is Jim Hightower saying, in fact, it's incomprehensibly stupid. Antibiotics are invaluable medicines we need for serious, life-threatening illnesses, but squandering them on sore throats has already brought us to the brink of superbugs that are resistant to everything. That's the nightmare of all nightmares.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So leave it to Fox News correspondent Peter Ducey to ask the dumb question. And look, I understand his role. His role is quite simply to go say the stupidest stuff, try and get a reaction so they can throw it out to the folks who are watching Fox News with their mouth gaping open while on the can. I get that. I get that's their job in all of this. But, in a moment when, an adversary is invading a friendly country, do you go to our leader and go, did you underestimate the other guy? Is this your fault? I mean, do you really do that? And the answer, yes, when you're at Fox News, because if you've been watching Fox News and paying attention, they're Putin's cheerleaders. And here to share some thoughts and some of the cheers, I've asked Craig Herrington to come talk with us. Craig is a research director over at Media Matters for America. Craig, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So
I know I shouldn't be surprised, and I know that it seems like every day they keep going lower and lower. But this is one of those things that to me is just almost, it's unforgivable. I mean, to go, did you underestimate him? Even though the president's been saying all along, this is where we're heading. Should I be surprised?
Yeah. The strangest thing about that Ducey question, the question from Peter Ducey during the press conference earlier today, is he seemed to think he was well prepped for that. He thought that he had Biden, and he said, "You called him a worthy adversary. Did you underestimate him?" And then Biden goes, "No, I called him a worthy adversary," which means that he's an adversary and he's worthy of our attention. It was like he walked right into this box canyon. And one of the things I think was most interesting about it, and I remember, we were watching it live, and the team at Media Matters was all reacting to that interaction, moment by moment on our online messaging, and all of us, we're sort of laughing, but at the end of the day, these Fox personalities, they exist in the same Fox News bubble that their viewers exist in, and in Peter Ducey's world, Joe Biden is completely feckless, and his administration has done absolutely nothing. They are totally out of their depth. They're not interested in standing up to Putin. They actually don't care about, American power. They don't care about maintaining, our position of primacy in the world. Fox News, after a while, you start to believe the lies that you tell yourself.
Yeah.
And Peter Ducey, he's a nepotism kid. His daddy got him his job at Fox. Peter might not know any better. Steve is an honest liar. Ducey might just have been born in this and doesn't know left from right, up from down.
No, that's an excellent point. And look, Fox News creates that bubble, and what they've been doing and what we've been seeing over the days is, you're right. Joe Biden can do nothing. It's all his fault. When the reality is, with the exception of Donald Trump, every person who would sit in that Oval Office, every person would do exactly what President Biden has already done. They would do the same thing because, look, there are only so many cards in your hand to be played. All I can imagine, if Trump were president, it would be, "Oh, hey, well, go ahead, good luck, and we'll send you a housewarming gift when you take over."
Yeah, I've actually thought about this a lot, and I've written about it a couple of times, tweeted about it with some of my foreign policy friends. A lot of people have brought this up, and a lot of people on Fox have been trying to reinvent a revisionist history of what the Trump administration was like, and they're all saying to themselves, well, this wouldn't have happened under Trump. Putin wouldn't have invaded under Trump. And some of them have cozied up to the madman theory, like acknowledging that Donald Trump was an irrational actor and someone that Putin couldn't count on to reliably respond in a certain way or in a proportionate way. And so maybe the so-called madman theory that came up first during Richard Nixon's presidency, maybe that would have come into play. There's a couple of people who aren't as cozy to Trump at Fox who've talked about that. But for the most part, they say that, well, Trump was just so strong, and he put America in a position of strength, and Biden is weak, and he has dementia, and he's weakened America, and he's hollowed out the military. Apparently all it takes is for the president to be a Democrat for one day,
yeah,
and all of a sudden the military is completely hollowed out and withered and incompetent. But this idea that Trump would have been stronger against Putin is laughable. Donald Trump literally stood next to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki during a press conference, and he was presented with a question from, I believe it was Jonathan Lemire, from the Associated Press at the time. And the journalist asked him if he would acknowledge, while standing next to Putin, the truth that Vladimir Putin directed a Russian intelligence operation to intervene in the 2016 election. We have proof of it, black and white, printed out. We have evidence of this. Will you admit this? And he wouldn't do it because Putin was standing right next to him. Yeah. Putin said, no, we didn't do it. And Trump said, I don't see any reason why it would be the Russian government.
I saw Helsinki like everybody else. I remember. But here's the thing, and here's the difference, and this is where my mind goes with Trump. Remember, had he won a second term, he had said he was going to pull us out of NATO. So we wouldn't be having this conversation because we wouldn't be in NATO. It wouldn't be it. And this is where the J.D. Vances of the world's not our problem. We don't care. Don't give a rat's behind. This is where that mindset comes from. There are people who want to be, American white nationalists. It's all about us and, never mind everyone else. Never mind our alliances around the world. Never mind anything else. Just, hey, pull out, leave everything to whatever.
Yeah. There are plenty of these opposing forces within the Republican Party. There's an interventionist force and an isolationist force. And some people who are total frauds like J.D. Vance, they try to embody both of those simultaneously, and it results in them taking consistently inconsistent positions on issues of foreign policy. Ted Cruz is another great example. But Fox News, in broad strokes, is a perfect encapsulation of this. On the one end, you have the white nationalist isolationist perspective from Tucker Carlson, who's openly supportive of Putin, thinks that Vladimir Putin should be an ally of the United States, thinks that he's a great symbol of the right type of leadership that America should aspire to. And then you have the interventionists, like, say, Pete Hegseth or Jesse Waters or some others on Fox News who are also, they share prime time with Tucker Carlson. And they think that, Putin, he's a bad guy, but he's at least strong and tough, and he's better at being a leader than Biden. And if only we had Trump back, things would be better and things would be equal. Yeah. But why would Putin and Trump be at odds with one another? They're open political allies. If Trump were president right now, perhaps there wouldn't be an invasion of Ukraine because Putin would not want to do something that might undermine the president, who is his ally and an incredibly valuable ally. One of the reasons that you might be invested in roiling the global oil markets or potentially destabilizing all of Europe is because you're interested in hurting the U.S. position. Or if you, in the case of Vladimir Putin, you probably have underestimated the strength of American resolve. Yep. Particularly,
and this is correct. This is exactly where I started today. Exactly in this place where you're at. Part of the calculus that Putin has come up with is that the American working class, the American voter, is going to lose their mind when they have to wait in line for gas or gas prices go up or anything like this happens. They're going to lose their mind, and then it's going to be this November a bloodbath at the polls, and then the former guy back in. So this is 2016 kind of in a different way.
Yeah, and Putin also exists within the same sort of propagandistic bubble that many conservative politicians in America exist in. He has a state-run media apparatus that functions essentially as an arm of his political party and as a propaganda network for domestic and global distribution, almost exactly in the same way that Fox News does. In fact, Fox News and Russian state media are so similar that Tucker Carlson and Mike Pompeo, so a host and a contributor on Fox News, are routinely having their appearances from Fox, their monologues from Fox, their segments from Fox, transcribed and replayed with Russian subtitles on Russian state media because they're so aligned with the agenda that Putin and his cronies are supporting. They're literally singing from the same songbook, but because of that, because they both are these sort of conservative echo chambers, they're these self-sustaining ecosystems. It's totally plausible to think that Vladimir Putin completely underestimated his opponent, his adversary in Joe Biden. Maybe he thinks Joe Biden is this doddering old fool with dementia, just the way the Republicans think that Joe Biden is such a thing.
Yeah, but Greg, here's the thing.
Alliance and thought this is ready to break.
Yeah, but even if Biden were, all of the mechanisms around him would be pushing him in this direction. Anyway, this response was going to be the American response regardless. You could have predicted this before anything. If he goes in there, they're going to be massive, painful sanctions because it's the only card we've got. We're not going to send in troops. We're not going to start throwing bombs, but we are going to make them suffer. And how long Putin, I think, is doing the calculus to think that, well, you just rile up the American people by shooting gas prices up, and next election, this is all over, and the U.S., well, it goes away in a couple of months.
Yeah, and a good example of how, this would have been sort of a steady hand of American foreign policy. Like there would have been certain expectations because the institutions, the treaty obligations are binding. When Putin invaded and attempted to annex and successfully did annex parts of the country of Georgia in the summer of 2008, this happened in the lead up to the Olympics, then the president was George W. Bush, who at the time was quite politically enfeebled by the recession, by the failures of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And how did the United States respond to this Russian incursion into Georgia? With the strongest sanction regime that we could muster at the time, the strongest sanction regime that the global community would join into.
Yeah.
When Putin did the same thing in 2014 with the annexation in Crimea and the subsequent invasions into the Donbass region that we've all become so familiar with in the past few weeks in eastern Ukraine, President Barack Obama responded with the strongest sanction regimes that he could muster at the time. And now, with Putin escalating again, seemingly in these 6-year cycles, the United States is in an even stronger position, and the Western Alliance and NATO are even more unified in opposition to Russian aggression. And we have the strongest plausible sanction regime that we could get, which is already being implemented. And the complaint you have from the right-wing media echo chamber, and unfortunately from many mainstream journalists as well, is, well, the sanctions weren't enough to deter Putin, and now they've been in place for 2 days and he hasn't withdrawn his troops. Well, yeah, the sanction regimes are meant to fundamentally and permanently alter the Russian economy and Russian financial sector for the better, or for the worse, I should say, permanently. And it takes more than 48 hours for those things to take effect.
Yeah.
But once people start having their condos and their yachts seized, once people aren't able to access their international account transfers, once Russians aren't able to launder their money through Deutsche Bank or through the Italian luxury goods market, which is the sort of stumbling block that the United States is currently trying to manage right now with our European allies, once they lose access to those things, you are really going to notice as these things pile up. And there are also big prestige projects that are potentially on the horizon. Russia is trying to build a lunar base and a orbital platform with China. Those things are incredibly expensive. Those are big national prestige projects. And if we hollow out the Russian economy with crippling sanctions, a sanction regime that is quite comparable actually to the robust sanction regime, the frankly burdensome sanction regime that we have had in place for several years in Iran. If the sanction regimes that we've put together for Russia have time to take hold, they might have to abandon some of these massive legacy projects that are supposed to be part of their permanent Russian 1,000-year history. All of that stuff is on the chopping block for Russia, and none of that stuff is threatened in the United States. The only thing we're doing is paying higher prices at the gas station, which are still incredibly low by comparisons to the entire rest of the developed world.
Yeah, good point. You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Craig Harrington. Craig's the research director over at Media Matters for America. You can check out their website, MediaMatters.org. Look, Craig, I'm thinking about the legacy stuff. I'm thinking about how does China then play into this? They've got these alliances. Is it possible China comes in and saves them, or does China stay out of it, allowing this just to be another problem the U.S. has, another problem someone else has, while they continue their march towards world dominance?
We don't know, right? So with the Olympics going on in 2022, there's this diplomatic boycott. China has been left out in the cold, and quite one of the things that has gotten a lot of attention from U.S. media is that Russia and China, senior level diplomats, president to president, seem to be trying to make a public statement that they were standing together. They tried to have a physical presence together during this Olympics as a sort of show of solidarity. But in response to this incursion, the Chinese government has not admitted or acknowledged that what's happening is an invasion. But they aren't necessarily running to the aid of the Russian government. And when asked a question, I think the question came from Peter Alexander from NBC News. I may be misremembering it from earlier today. But Biden was asked a question about what China's position is on this, and he said that he wasn't willing to speculate or comment on that at this moment, which means to my eye as a media observer, I think that is an indication that there is some development here, and either the Biden administration doesn't want to sort of upset the cart and potentially provoke China to act one way or the other, or they're working with China behind the scenes to try to get the Chinese to join into this international coalition. You know, it doesn't necessarily benefit the Chinese government to have Russia destabilizing much of the world and driving up energy prices. There's been some speculation that the Chinese and Russians might enter into energy contracts and, you know, finish a pipeline that would go through Pakistan or whatever. But those things take years to develop. Those physical infrastructure projects take time to develop. You know, one of the absurdities that we see in right-wing media is, well, they're demanding now that we should just drill, baby, drill in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But even if we did that, it takes 5 or 10 years for those projects to get to market and actually start to have effects on global supply chains. It's not a guarantee that the Chinese are going to side with the Russians as a sort of, you know, as two autocratic, despotic regimes, because they don't necessarily have the exact same interests in mind. And, you know, would the Chinese be willing to do this just for slightly cheaper gas or access to natural gas and crude petroleum exports from the Russian Federation? I don't know that. But
I don't know that either, Craig. But you know,
neither do the pundits on TV.
Yeah, but part of the thought also goes into and this is where I've taken the position we have to act in Ukraine, because if we do nothing, if the message is no, go ahead, you know, we give up on democracy. You know, Taiwan is next. So the Chinese take over Taiwan. They take over the South China Sea. We now have this race towards empire, where I think, you know, if you send a strong message in Ukraine that, you know, this isn't going to be something that's allowed to happen without some pushback. Yeah. Maybe you don't have the Chinese expansion either.
And this is one of the things that we've seen, you know, with the United States standing up so immediately and unflinchingly in support of NATO, in support particularly of the recent members of the NATO expansion since the 1990s. One of Putin's explicit demands in the lead up to the full invasion of Ukraine, one of his explicit demands was that NATO withdraw membership from those former Soviet republics that Putin sees as not just part of Russia's sphere of influence, but according to his speech 2 days ago, he sees Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Romania as part of Russia itself. And he demanded that NATO withdraw forces from those regions and commit to never letting new former Soviet republics into NATO expansion in the future. And NATO stood up and said, no, we're standing by Estonia, we're standing by Latvia, we're standing by Lithuania. We have treaty obligations. We also have treaty obligations in Taiwan. And so the indication from the United States is actually that we're not going to get pushed over this ledge. We're not going to get drawn into a peer-to-peer conflict on the ground in Ukraine on day one with two nuclear-armed strong powers on either side. That's suicide for, you know, the entire planet. But at the same time, we're not going to just walk away from our commitments and from our allies, and our allies aren't going to walk away from us. And I don't think that Putin expected that response, in part because his media apparatus at home and the American media that he consumes, which is Fox News essentially, they were hedging that the United States was going to flinch, that Biden wasn't up to the challenge, and that we were going to get pushed around and walked away.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, I don't know how you make that. I don't know how you make that choice, but you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong, because it is what has been thrown out there often and often. Craig, I appreciate the time, the work that you guys do. Always great stuff. I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Good stuff. Craig Herrington, he's the research director there at Media Matters. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at the work that Craig does and the good folks over at Media Matters. Look, I think he's spot on right. I think I think Putin saw this, and I've been saying this for a while. If you're looking at us from the outside, if you're looking at this country as an observer from overseas through our media, through what's being reported, we are a divided country. You've got this trucker convoy going across the country. You got that one idiot yesterday who driving his Tri-Annie truck down the highway with, learn to spell. Anyone who is sitting in that Oval Office, anyone, with the exception of Donald Trump, I believe does the exact same thing in the exact same time frame. Because it's the card you had to play. And now what happens to those sanctions? How much does this hurt the rich? This is the question. Because if you remember yesterday, the story was Putin was getting together with all the rich people, all the tycoons, all of the captains of industry, all of the titans of industry were coming together because he's going, hey, rich people, this might hurt a little bit. But here's what we're going to get. Here's the pot of gold I'm selling you. Other rich people, there's a payoff. Here's the pot of gold. And this is all we got to do, because look, America, they're not going to the resolve ain't there. They're not who they were. They're a bunch of old angry white people who love us, who think that we think the way they think. They won't hold on long. In fact, immediately we're going to have, people sympathizing with us. Tucker Carlson. Oh, he's not such a bad guy. He throws reporters out of windows. Yeah, but he didn't throw me out a window. He doesn't throw the Fox News people out of windows. He kills media people. Yeah, well, we would do that too here if we could get away with it. Understand who we're dealing with, and understand that the people in this country are supporting them. This is one of those moments where you go, which side are you on? Democracy of, for, and by we the people, or autocracy of a strong man? It's that simple. And look, I got friends who are, Putin's a strong man, not like that weak, feeble Joe Biden. You know who was weak and feeble? Think FDR. Can you imagine? And this is the point that if you think of nothing else, FDR was literally paralyzed from polio in a wheelchair. And no reporter ever published a picture of that man in that wheelchair in his duties. Nobody mocked his weakness. Nobody called him weak on anything in those moments. I mean, stop and think about the difference. Can you imagine during World War II, even the people who hated him, even the fascists who wanted to align with Germany because they were making tons of money, even they didn't go that far. We have people in this country who are rooting for an adversary. They are rooting for someone that it's one of those moments where you go, never thought. Never in a million years. I thought we'd have our differences. I thought we'd have knockdown dragouts. We'd have disagreements as a country, as a society. Absolutely. This is one of those. Never thought. Never thought that you would have a major news outlet in this country. Never thought it would happen. But, welcome. Here we are. Fox News Nation. and angering, scary, frustrating. But what we get. And today, if you watched Fox News, it was all about everybody but Putin. It was Biden's fault. It was AOC's fault. It was the Keystone Pipeline. Heard that a bunch. Wow. We got work to do, folks. If you missed any of today's program, download the podcast at the website or wherever you get your podcasts. Get the app on your smartphone. Take it on the go. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people